Since 1992, the Human Union movement is developing a commercial hemp paper, textile and oil industry, a chemical-free industry providing much-needed employment and income.
They do not have to make hashish out of their plant because they can sell the stalks, they can sell the seeds, they can have food and they can have money from one plant. So the people and the farmer of these surroundings are really appreciating our project here.
This valley has an abundance of hemp and enthusiastic labour. Tarakola's budding hemp industry is potentially a model for sustainable economic prosperity throughout the developing world.
Hemp could be used as a fuel source, an oil source, as well as a paper-making fiber.
Could hemp fuel help us to kick our dependency on highly toxic fossil fuels? Carbon monoxide is the leading cause of death in this country from poisoning. It accounts for more fatalities each year than all drug overdoses combined.
Over history, it would be hard to predict how many people have died from gasoline that didn't know what killed them. It is a poison-spreading material because it is distilled with benzene, hexene, and xylene, and toluene. These chemicals are all known carcinogenic materials.
Could this be the solution? That which fuels a romantic dinner is also a good fuel. Normal drinking alcohol, also known as ethanol, is the cleanest of all liquid fuels. George Tyson is developing techniques to produce ethanol from fast-growing, high cellulose plants like hemp.
We jokingly say this is the fuel that if you were burning it in your car, the reason a dog would chase your car was because he liked the smell of the exhaust pipe. As you can see, there is no smoke emitting from this in this room. Try this with a tablespoon or two of gasoline and you will have the comparative test. Also, when your engine is through burning on gasoline, take it apart and see how much dirty carbon you find in the engine. We found that running a car 3,500 miles, we couldn't even get a white glove dirty when we took our finger inside of the exhaust pipe.
All plants are storehouses of solar energy, and all plants can be fermented to produce ethanol fuel. Plants also produce the oxygen needed to combust the fuel in a car. The emissions, carbon dioxide and water, are reabsorbed by plants. It is a clean and balanced cycle.
When one reviews all of the possible alternative fuels that we may use for transport use, ethanol emerges as about the only one that can achieve significant reductions in carbon dioxide accumulation in the atmosphere.
Even the 10% blend, where you only have 10% ethanol in the gasoline, lowers some emissions as much as 25 to 30%.
For this reason, blends of 10 or 15% ethanol with gasoline are being used in several states in the US and in Australia as a means of reducing air pollution. Ethanol blends also eliminate the need for lead in fuel. The ethanol is being distilled from sugarcane, grains or residue starch, as is the case with this ethanol plant in Nowra, Australia. Ethanol produced here is also being added to diesel fuel. Buses running on this new 15% ethanol fuel are emitting up to 40% less carbon monoxide, 50% less smoke, and up to 10% less nitrous oxide than straight diesel fuel.
In the context of ethanol making a significant contribution to transport fuel needs, we need to think about producing ethanol from cellulose, or more correctly, lignocellulosic feedstocks.
All plants are made from lignin and cellulose. Fast-growing plants that are low in lignin and high in cellulose are most suitable for producing ethanol.
Things like switchgrass, canaf, hemp has tremendous potential, both because it has many products to be produced from it, and also because of the tonnage that can be produced per acre.
Ethanol from lignocellulose crops is being developed by Tyson Xylem Corporation and the Solar Energy Research Institute in the US, and Pace Research and the University of New South Wales in Australia. Research is showing that ethanol could be produced economically on a small farm or community level. It could also become one of the world's major agro-industries, replacing the petroleum industry entirely.
It's estimated that by the year 2000, we will have demonstrated processes and technologies for the production of ethanol from cellulosics that will be able to produce ethanol at a price competitive with crude oil prices. Even the United States could produce all of its transport fuel needs as neat ethanol. Australia, no problem. All of our liquid fuel for transport could be ethanol.
The time has come. Your science and technology are complete. Your art and culture have reached a peak. Now work with my energy. Work with my energy. Work with my energy.
These days, the hemp plant is most commonly associated with the drug marijuana found in its flowers and leaves. Historically, however, marijuana has been much more than a recreational drug. The father of Chinese medicine, Emperor Shen Nung, included marijuana in his pharmacopoeia almost 5,000 years ago. Recently, marijuana was found in a 1600-year-old skeleton of a woman giving birth near Jerusalem. Medical literature of the time indicates that marijuana had the power to increase the force of uterine contractions and to provide a significant reduction of labour pain. References to marijuana are also recorded in Egyptian, Assyrian, Greek and Roman writing from the same era. On the Indian subcontinent, marijuana is found in many preparations in ancient Ayurvedic medicine and is still widely used today.
In the last century, marijuana was mainly used in tincture form as a treatment for migraine headaches, for menstrual cramps, for nervous anxiety, as a sedative.
Dr. Lester Grinspoon is the world's foremost researcher and author on medical marijuana.
Now, the modern uses of cannabis are quite striking. First of all, it's people who have to get cancer chemotherapies for the treatment of various kinds of cancer. Some of them lead to the most pernicious nausea and vomiting. And there are drugs which are used, available antiemetic drugs. But even the newest ones don't give everybody relief from this. Give them cannabis, about 90% of them get excellent relief. They refer to it as miraculous. It's used in the treatment of glaucoma. It's a disease of the increase in intraocular pressure, and it can lead to blindness. Well, there are drugs to treat this, but those drugs have a lot of problems with them.
My condition is glaucoma, and after a year of trying the conventional medications, which are very serious, some of them are actually based on nerve gas, and my body did not respond well to them, a doctor decided to uphold his Hippocratic oath instead of the hypocritical law and tell me that if I didn't start using marijuana, I would go blind.
It's been demonstrated that the cannabis has a remarkable capacity to lower intraocular pressure, and there are people now who believe that they have saved their eyesight by using cannabis.
As long as I use marijuana in any way, such as eating it or smoking it, either way, my pressures remain perfectly normal, as if I don't have the disease at all. It's a total deterrent for me.
Cannabis has also been proven to be of therapeutic value in the treatment of AIDS, multiple sclerosis, paraplegia and quadriplegia, asthma, epilepsy, pain relief, and other ailments. It has also been used as a topical antibiotic and analgesic. Dr. Andrew Weil was the first and about the only independent researcher to ever get permission to study marijuana. He carried out his lab experiments at Harvard University Medical School in 1968. He is also a well-known author.
I think the great advantage to trying to find medical uses of marijuana is that it's so non-toxic. You know, relative to most of the drugs that we use in medicine today, it's very harmless. It just doesn't do that much to the physical body.
But marijuana remains one of the most illegal substances on the planet. In US law, it is placed in the most dangerous category, Schedule 1.
It's in that schedule that drugs like LSD, heroin, and marijuana are placed. And drugs that are in that schedule can't be used at all. They're completely off limits. You can't even do any clinical research. For the last 19 years, all efforts to pry cannabis out of Schedule 1 and just move it to Schedule 2 have failed.
In 1972, the US Drug Enforcement Administration's senior judge, Judge Francis Young, commenced hearings on marijuana.
He came up with a 60-odd page opinion saying marijuana is probably the safest drug in the pharmacopoeia, and it certainly has medical utility, and it should be moved to Schedule 2. It's quite extraordinary just how steadfast the U.S. government has been in not allowing this to be used as a medicine. My hunch is that there's some kind of fear that if we use it as a medicine, the camel will get its nose under the tent, and heavens only knows what might happen.
As Judge Francis Young said, it's unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious, and I add immoral to that list.
It's become so expensive on the street now that frequently these people who need it for medicinal reasons grow it, and they get caught.
I was arrested and taken to a county jail, which was pretty unpleasant, for the illegal rape, as I call it.
I tried it, and I was able to actually cook a meal and eat it. And ever since then, we smoked it for 2 years, and then that's when we got arrested.
12 agents from the local Vice Squad played Miami Vice, shattered their front door, put guns to their heads, drug them off to jail.
I didn't have no shoes because they didn't let me, you know, put my shoes on. So I went to jail barefooted. That was my worst nightmare that I've ever had.
It's just awful that these people should have to suffer this way. I mean, the law imposes, here are people who are already suffering from serious diseases and disorders and symptoms, and the law is now imposing another layer of anxiety on these poor people.
The American pharmaceutical establishment and government have been very reluctant to allow people to use marijuana for these purposes, because to do so would be to admit that it had positive uses. And one of the fictions that has to be maintained in the war against this evil plant is that it has no redeeming qualities. And if you established a therapeutic use for it, that would be a redeeming quality. So instead, the government wants people to use synthetic THC or analogs of THC. In my experience, those substances are more toxic and often do not have as good effects as marijuana itself.
THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is the active ingredient in marijuana. Ironically, synthetic THC, marketed as Marinol, is legally available for medical use.
Doctors, pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies are very threatened by the idea of people having direct access to substances that really work. And so there is a lot of effort to scare people away from natural medicines by telling them that they're dangerous, that things out of nature are more dangerous for you than the products of pharmaceutical companies. And I think that is not a good thing to tell people. In my experience, natural medicines are much, much safer than synthetic and refined ones.
This realization is spreading. In 1991, Dennis Peron launched a San Francisco citywide referendum for medical marijuana. Proposition P won by a landslide. This preceded similar victories in several other US cities and the California statewide initiative of 1996. Now, in downtown San Francisco, the Brownie Mary Rathburn building is home to the Cannabis Buyers Club that serves marijuana to 10,000 patients. Attempts by the federal DEA to close down the building and arrest Peron and his staff have been firmly blocked by the San Francisco city authorities.
2 million people are infected with the HIV virus. 500,000 people get cancer every year. These people are our brothers and our sisters, our relatives, our aunts and uncles, people we love. I don't think that any of these people, any of these relatives would stand in the way of their brothers and sisters getting a medicine that would help them.
Unfortunately, modern usage of the hemp plant centers around only one of its many uses, its ability to alter consciousness. Like the other uses, this is also not a recent phenomenon.
The oldest domesticated plants are the drug plants. We have historical evidence that they were domesticated by people before food crops. In various cultures throughout history, marijuana has been used, valued, because it was a doorway to other states of consciousness.
It's a blessed plant. It's a blessed plant.
It can give you a little happiness.
Marijuana has been an important religious sacrament throughout Africa, the Middle East and Asia for thousands of years. In Hinduism, the god Shiva is said to have brought cannabis from the Himalayas for human enjoyment and enlightenment.
शिव शिव जितना पीब उतना जीव जे न जाने गांजा के कलयुग लड़का से लड़की बम बम.
Why then is marijuana use so controversial in Western culture?
Marijuana cultivation and use in Europe probably was mainly as a fiber plant and food plant. And it's very possible that many people who grew it for fiber and for seeds did not know of its use as a psychoactive drug.
Terence McKenna is a leading researcher and author on the traditional uses of psychoactive plants.
The absence of a straightforward hallucinogen or psychedelic in the flora of Europe has given Western man a kind of particular horror of the kind of boundary-dissolving experiences that attend these plants. Another factor is the Christian church. The reliance of magical folk practitioners on plants was consistently suppressed by the church. So we have evolved our peculiarly alienated form of science and social polity completely in the absence of any connection back into the magical side of nature that Celtic and earlier peoples were very concerned to cultivate. So this, I think, is the source of our particularly destructive relationship to the earth and our particularly alienated state of social relationships among ourselves. Only 100 years has Western humanity and civilization actually grappled with the dilemmas which these substances pose. So we're at the beginning of making an adjustment which many traditional societies made a comfortable accommodation to millennia ago.
Our beginning to make an adjustment has been a rough one.
Our nation has zero tolerance for casual drug use.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
If you do drugs, you will be caught. And when you're caught, you will be punished.
One of the major concerns is drug use among young people.
I think marijuana can make kids space out and lose their concentration, and I think the only remedy for that is good drug education especially aimed at young people, about what are appropriate uses of it and what aren't. And I don't think it's a good idea to be stoned in school, for example. But we don't have any real drug education at the moment because in the present climate, that's impossible. You can't admit that illegal drugs have any positive uses. And all of the educational materials that are used in schools are designed to scare people away from that substance by exaggerating its dangers, and that doesn't work.
If you tell a 15-year-old that all these terrible things are going to happen to him or her when they smoke marijuana, and they've already tried it and they know that it didn't, why should they listen to you when you tell them that crack cocaine might kill them? I wouldn't have if I was 15 and was misinformed like that.
I think that kind of education has a very negative effect. I think it enormously stimulates curiosity on the part of young people to try the forbidden substance.
Now, I can imagine a few whispers out there. Maybe you think we'll never get drugs under control, that it's too easy for the dealers to get back on the street. Well, those days are over, too. The revolving door just jammed. Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room. We're almost doubling prison space. Some think there aren't enough prosecutors. We'll hire them, with the largest increase in federal prosecutors in history.
America is now the country with the highest rate of incarceration. Approximately 20% of criminal convictions are marijuana related.
There is no inherent psychopharmacological harmfulness of marijuana, which is anyway comparable to the harm of arresting more than 400,000 people, mostly young people, for marijuana transgressions every year in this country.
We will look back on this era and the response to drugs in this country and think that was worse than what happened in the McCarthy era. It is insanity run amok, and there's not a sane voice in the federal government saying anything about it.
All this vigorous prosecution of marijuana, for example, has changed a situation where people grew their own, and usually rather mild marijuana, into a situation where marijuana traffic is dominated by organized crime.
The cash crop in California that is the most profitable is marijuana in California. A number of other states also depend heavily upon the production of marijuana. In addition to that, you have the profits made by banks through laundering money.
What we are doing in the war on drugs is exactly what the most successful drug kingpins like. We are, in a sense, using government money to keep the small-time opposition out of the business, to keep the prices up, and to keep the supply coming from only the most protected sources.
Prohibition breeds corruption, breeds